discussed for decades to come. Last Sunday, President Biden exited the presidential race with a note posted on social media platform X. That's how he let everybody know that he was not going to run for president. He then endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee for president. This unprecedented move has prompted a flurry of news, and it's important for Christians to think about all of these developments from a biblical worldview. So joining me today for our weekly worldview conversation is David Closson. He, of course, is the director of the Center for Biblical Worldview here at FRC. David, welcome to the program. Always great to have you on Washington Watch.
Oh, thanks again for having me, Jody.
All right, well, let's 30,000-foot view. What is your reaction to this week's events?
Well, what a breathtaking 2 weeks it's been, Jody.
Yeah.
It's actually, as we're having this conversation, it's been less than 2 weeks that the 45th president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, was almost assassinated. And that, again, that's less than 2 weeks ago. And in a way that almost seems like ancient history, seeing what's kind of unfolded since that July 13th shooting with the Republican National Convention and the historic platform that actually kind of watered down a lot of issues that social conservatives care about. The selection of J.D. Vance, senator from Ohio, 39 years old, to be the Republican nominee for vice president. And what happened earlier this week, where Joe Biden did something that hasn't happened since March of 1968, where a incumbent president decides not to pursue his party's nomination, and of course that he would have been eligible for. And unlike Lyndon Baines Johnson, who stepped aside because of the unpopularity of the Vietnam War, Joe Biden actually went through the primary process. He won 14 million votes and then decides to walk away. So absolutely historic, Jody. And I think stepping back, kind of looking at it kind of through that lens of a biblical worldview, I think we are now seeing, the president used the phrase passing of the torch. And in terms of biblical worldview, I think what we're now going to see moving forward, it really is, Jody, as liberal as Joe Biden is, it can get more liberal. It can get even more progressive. And I think what we're going to see now, Jody, is the leftward lurch of the Democratic Party, that I think that'll be part of Joe Biden's legacy.
Yeah, there's no question what you just said. I can't tell you, week after week after week, it seems sometimes, particularly there were certain seasons, it seemed week after week, while I was in Congress, I'd come home thinking it cannot get any worse than what we just went through, only to find out the next week it gets worse. And so you're right. I mean, there is always room for this to get worse, and we may be watching some of that right now. Now, you mentioned, of course, President Biden's historic decision, among other key events that have happened in recent days. But I noticed that there are some Christian leaders who have actually called this a selfless act. I know I kind of withdrew a little bit from that characterization, but what's your response to that thought?
I guess my thought to that is I think there's a lot we don't know. I think it'll be interesting a couple years from now. I'm sure Biden staffers are going to kind of write tell-all books where we'll learn a little bit more kind of the president's thinking in the weeks, days, and hours leading up to the decision. In my view, I don't think I feel comfortable using the phrase selfless act because look what happened for the 3 weeks between that CNN debate between Biden and Trump and to the president's decision on Sunday. It's incredible. And again, the history books are going to talk about this. There's never been a more disastrous moment in a presidential campaign than that debate that Joe Biden had. You and I, Jody, have had a conversation about that shortly after the debate. That was a historic meltdown. People will be studying that. It's worse than the famous JFK versus Nixon debate where Richard Nixon was sweating, and he looked kind of disheveled and unprepared. That debate triggered 3 weeks of soul-searching and of uproar amongst the Democratic Party. And again, a lot we don't know at this point, but it does sure appear you had 36 elected Democrats at the federal level calling for Biden to drop out. You had Nancy Pelosi, you had Chuck Schumer, the Clintons, the Obamas that seemed to be applying a lot of pressure from all the public available reporting. And so, in my view, it does appear that the president was pushed out. And again, we'll find out more about this. But I think as Christians, I think as a good principle, an opportunity to learn here, we should, again, reserve judgment. Christians are people of truth, and I don't think we want to ever prejudge a situation. But the language of selfless act, the facts that we know don't seem to bear that out, at least at this point.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was leaning. And beyond that, I was thinking, what's in the best interest of the country? This whole decision is not about self. It is about what's in the best interest of this country. And but anyways, let's move on because I want to hit a series of questions that I want us all both to have, but you primarily, since this is your area of expertise from a biblical perspective. Kamala Harris is now the presumptive nominee for the Democrats. Okay. So I want us to look at her record from a biblical perspective. Christians must vote. All right, period. We need to engage this thing. We've got to stand up to the plate and vote. Now, we may not like who we're voting for, but we have to look at who the choices are, and we have to make the best decision we can based upon biblical principles. So with Kamala Harris now being the presumptive nominee for the Democrats, I would like for us to look at her record from a biblical perspective. So let's start with abortion. What do we know about her views on this topic?
Well, Jody, we know actually quite a bit, and the reason we know quite a bit is Kamala Harris. I think a lot of people on the right are going to make the argument, rightly so. This is someone who's never won a vote in a Democratic primary. She ran for president 3.5 years ago, dropped out even before voting began in Iowa, and of course this cycle she didn't get a single vote because it was Joe Biden who was the top of the ticket. But Kamala Harris has been in a high-level office for 20 years. Prior to serving as vice president, she was the senator from California, junior senator with Dianne Feinstein. Before that, she served several years as California's attorney general, and before that, she was the district attorney in San Francisco. And so Kamala Harris does have a track record where she's weighed in on all of these issues that Christians care about, abortion being chief among them. What's interesting, Jody, is actually Kamala Harris actually has a 0% lifetime rating from Family Research Council Action. 0% lifetime, and she has 100%.
Let me say that one more time, people. Zero. Score.
0%.
It cannot get worse. Let's just put that on the record.
Well, what's interesting, Jody, she conversely has 100% score for Planned Parenthood. So when you're thinking about abortion, compare the Planned Parenthood scorecard versus the FRC Action scorecard. It's really, really clear. A couple things I'd love to point out, Jody, is when she was Attorney General of California, she was Attorney General David DeLayden did those undercover videos with the Center for Medical Progress that exposed Planned Parenthood was selling fetal remains, selling baby body parts. And when that news, it shocked the conscience of the nation. What did Kamala Harris do? She didn't go after Planned Parenthood, Jody. She went after David DeLayden. She had his house raided. Yep. She had his computer confiscated. So it's just incredible. As a candidate for president, she was running on abortion, said that she wanted to codify Roe v. Wade. She actually said she wanted to require federal pre-clearance for any state-level pro-life law. She obviously said she wanted to repeal the Mexico City policy, wanted to repeal the Hyde Amendment. It goes on and on. A couple other real quick votes I'll mention. As a senator, she had an opportunity to vote on several pro-life bills, including the Born Alive Survivor Protection Act that would provide protection to babies who survive abortion. She voted against that twice. She had an opportunity to vote on a bill that would make it illegal for babies who can feel pain in the womb, the Pain Capable Act. She voted against that, Jody, in 2018 and 2020. Let me just summarize this. Whenever Kamala Harris has had an opportunity to vote on a bill dealing with abortion, she has been on the pro-abortion side and has been against the pro-life side.
All right, I've got several more that I want to hit, so we're going to have to kind of rapidly go through some of these. Where does she stand on religious liberty?
Kamala Harris is the original co-sponsor of the Equality Act that would basically redefine how we understand religious freedom in this country. It would codify sexual orientation, gender identity as protected classes and exempt sexual orientation, gender identity from the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Whenever religious liberty and the claims of religious people have come into conflict with kind of the sexual revolution, unfortunately, Kamala Harris has sided with the LGBT activist over committed Christians.
Wow. Okay, so you mentioned the LGBT activist. She officiated literally one of the first same-sex weddings in California. So tell us, is there more that we need to know about where her advocacy stands with LGBT issues?
I think it sums it up, but what's interesting, Jody, is it shows that she was ahead of the curve. She was ahead of Barack Obama. She was ahead of Joe Biden. In 2013, she was serving as California Attorney General. When you're the Attorney General of a state, you're responsible for defending your state's laws. And she declined, actually, the law of the state was Proposition 8, defining marriage between a man and a woman. And she declined to even enforce it. She left it up to other people to enforce her state's law because she said she just, according to, again, she kind of made this up out of whole cloth, that she had the discretion whether or not to enforce the law and decided not to. And then as soon as this court struck down the Proposition 8 in California that defined a marriage between a man and a woman, she was the first person to officiate a wedding in San Francisco with two same-sex identifying individuals. Wow.
Okay, another big issue that comes up a lot right now, people are concerned about law and order. Just generally speaking, now, it's my understanding that Kamala Harris actually had at one point raised money for the protesters during the BLM riots. So what do we know? Where does she stand on law and order, generally speaking?
Yeah, generally speaking, I think that is emblematic. Jody, I actually pulled up the tweet that you just mentioned. This was at the height of the BLM riots there in Minneapolis during the George Floyd protest. And she tweeted, if you're able to chip in now, to the Minnesota Freedom Fund to help post bail for those protesting on the ground in Minnesota. And what's interesting, even up to earlier this week, that fund still exists. And that money, to the tune of hundreds of thousands, has actually been used to release actually pretty hardened criminals, people that as soon as they're released have committed crimes, including some people, and this has been well documented, murder and rape. And so as to my knowledge, that tweet is still available. I wouldn't be surprised if it disappears quickly as more people realize this. But at the height of those riots, she was definitely not on the side of the police. She was on the side of the rioters.
Yeah, it's amazing. That thing may disappear before this show is over, which is less than 2 minutes. Real quickly, is there anything else in Vice President Kamala's Harris record that is worth noting, things that Christians should know about real quickly?
I'll give you one thing, Jody. I think this election, like most elections, judicial nominees, so important. Who's ever president can make up to hundreds of lifetime appointments to the federal bench. In 2018, when she was a senator, there was a gentleman named Brian Boucher who was up for a federal appointment. Ultimately, he was confirmed. But during questioning, she actually questioned him on his affiliation with the Knights of Columbus, very mainstream Catholic organization, Jody. And she asked him, do you realize the Knights of Columbus is against reproductive health? Do you realize they define marriage between a man and a woman? Again, broad mainstream Catholic views that the churches have for 2,000 years. She went after him, insinuating that anyone that holds those views is not fit for the federal judiciary. We should all be scared and unnerved by that.
David Closson, always great to have you on these Biblical Worldview segments. Thank you so much for joining us yet again on Washington Watch. Hope you have a fantastic weekend.
You too. Thank you, Jody.